One thing that I would say is that, it comes almost in the space between empathy and maybe inspiration, is that oftentimes, like, you listen to sounds and you listen to different organisms, and you're really at awe of this orchestra of things that these animals are able to do. Like, bowhead whales, singing through under the ice and in the Arctic, and creating these complex songs and singing for many many minutes at a time. This time of the year, we are going through some migration of warblers, and these tiny little warblers the size of your thumb creates these complex songs and projects it with all of his heart, or her heart, and to send a message, and for us to kind of first experience that and then get inspired to understand that. I think that creates that connection and kind of gets to that space of empathy, but that's more of a human experience to empathy towards the singers of the biological world. Within or interspecies, if that empathy exists in the acoustic space, that's a fascinating question, and I don't have answer or insight into that.
For me, as a fish biologist, when I tell people I study fish acoustic communication and fish singing at each other, I often get a lot of really weird looks where it's like, what, fish do that? People fully appreciate it for birds singing and whales singing, and other critters in nature. But I think when people, non-scientists start to find out that all these animals are using sounds to communicate, I think that gives people a broader appreciation for what animals are capable of. And to not, I don't like to, for me personally, don't like to say that one animal is smarter than another. These are animals that evolved over hundreds of millions of years to do what they do, and the fact that they still exist means they're good enough at it. But I do think that when you start to share with people how this diversity of animals are using sounds to communicate, I do think it imparts significant appreciation on the part of the public to realize these are more than just a sack of cells existing in nature, that there's something more to it. It can, in some cases, be relatively sophisticated information encoded in sounds that are being transmitted between sender and receiver. And so the dynamics of a speaker, so to speak, or a singer and a listener, is this dyadic relationship that we see really at all levels of life.
Intelligence part, or kind of moving forward into their kind of the life trajectory by using sound and using their environment. We see many examples of how some of the species are kind of the masters of their own ecosystems and habitats and domains. A blue whale kind of almost uses the physics of the ocean to send a message that can travel hundreds of miles, if not more. And evolution and then adaptation to that evolutionary process and understanding what's going on, that's probably guiding them to be able to orchestrate that long-term, long-distance communication processes. Even, birds and other animals, they are using their habitats, even this type of canopy, or what level of the forest that they reside in, and what type of vocalization that they produce, and how far they project. All of those information is really, really intricate, and it's in many ways very smartly designed. Another thing happens is, how the physical side of it and also acoustic communication side of it, they are trying to project information to the receiver that they want to receive, but also evading danger, So my mate can hear me, but the predator shouldn't. So creating these channels, and oftentimes there's a talk about acoustic niche, which is some species occupy a certain part of this time frequency domain of sound versus acoustic partitioning, and all these type of intricate things that more we look, the more we find. And they are masters of their environment, and they're using sound to drive some of the functions that Aaron mentioned to further their own well-being and their life cycle. Well-being may not maybe more anthropomorphized term, but success towards their species end goal. We see incredible examples of that all over, but more is needed to understand, because again, these are, especially from the acoustic point of view, it's a pretty quickly evolving science, and the more we look, the more new information that we find.
So I think one of the phenomena that you see both sociologically among humans as well as in some ecosystems is almost homogenization occurring at large scales. Like, so I have family from the deep south, and really strong southern drawl that you used to hear, that for me I hear and I immediately envision my grandparents sitting on the porch. And now you go down to a place like Georgia, so many of these mannerisms and way of speaking are disappearing as there's more and more mixing between different subpopulations. A lot of those nuances to speech and to ways of speaking are disappearing. I think in parallel with that is that with losses of biodiversity, these soundscapes that we listen to, that we grow to understand nature, are also changing. So think about with, let's say, the loss of wolves in the Mountain West, the howls that you might hear at night are disappearing. That you have some of these acoustic mimics, things like I mentioned, like lyrebirds, that are able to repeat with astonishing clarity the sounds of other species around them. So what happens when those species go extinct? Do those aspects of their mimicry, do those disappear as well, or do they encapsulate soundscapes of eras gone by, and does it persist? I think what's so cool in thinking about this connection, this deeply rooted connection between song or speech and cultural history is, we see this in humpback whales, where song is culturally transmitted. We're still trying to figure out what exactly it means with these really complex and elaborate acoustic displays, but what we know is that somewhere in the Western Pacific, this structure of themes and notes emerges, and it basically propagates across the Central Pacific to the east and the Indian Ocean across to the west, and it's changing over time. These are learned songs that animals are doing, and they're adapting. And so we can see this process of cultural transmission occurring, in these great whales. And I think a really captivating question is, how widespread is the cultural transmission through speech or song across the animal kingdom? Certainly humans do it. The fact that whales are doing it is really provocative, and then I think it raises the question of where else is it occurring.